King Charles has a will, and buried inside it are decisions that will change two lives forever within hours, not days. Most people assume Harry and Meghan's future depends on what they say next. But the real threat isn't a press conference. It's a clock. The moment Charles takes his last breath, a quiet, centuries-old legal machine activates, and Harry and Meghan won't be able to stop a single gear from turning. Most people imagine a monarch's death as a moment of stillness. Black cars, drawn curtains, a nation holding its breath. But inside British constitutional law, there is no stillness. There is only sequence. The second a reigning monarch dies, a process called accession begins. It doesn't wait for grief. It doesn't wait for family. The demise of the Crown Act, legislation with roots stretching back centuries, ensures royal authority transfers instantly. The old king is gone. The new king exists. Simultaneously, without pause. Within the first hour, the accession council assembles at St. James's Palace. Senior ministers, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, they gather to formally confirm the new sovereign. By the time most people are still processing the news on their phones, the machinery of the British state has already moved on. And here is where Harry and Meghan enter the picture. Or rather, where they don't. They are not senior working royals. That is a legal classification. And that classification matters enormously because the protections and courtesies extended to Harry's family right now exist in a gray area, one tolerated under Charles, one that evaporates the moment William's authority becomes absolute. Certain diplomatic status markers, palace, coordinated security briefings, institutional courtesies that never needed to be written down because Charles was alive and Charles cared. The monarchy is not a family business. It is a constitutional machine, ancient, indifferent, and precise, and machines don't make exceptions for complicated family histories. None of it requires anyone to be cruel. The system handles it, quietly, completely, in the first 60 minutes. Before we go further, do you think Harry actually understands what he legally gave up in 2020? Not emotionally, legally. Drop your answer in the comments. There is a version of the story where Harry's security battle looks like a wealthy man fighting for a luxury. That version is wrong. The Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit doesn't assign protection based on fame. It assigns protection based on threat classification, built from intelligence reports, monitored communications, specific and credible information about specific and credible dangers. Harry has seen those reports. The public hasn't. In 2023, Harry took the British government to court over strict police protection. The case, Duke of Sussex versus Home Office, revealed something most coverage glossed over. Harry wasn't asking for a free service. He was offering to fund police protection himself, out of his own pocket. The government said no. The refusal wasn't about money. It was about classification. Right now, Harry's requests move through a system that still carries the quiet weight of Charles's presence. Not formally, nothing is written down, but institutional deference is real. Charles's known concern for Harry's safety has functioned as an informal pressure valve. It hasn't reversed the Home Office's position, but it has kept certain conversations alive. The moment Charles is gone, that pressure valve closes permanently. William has no personal incentive to apply informal pressure on Harry's behalf. Not after the books, not after the interviews, not after years of public accusations. What replaces Charles's quiet influence is pure protocol. The Home Office will assess Harry as a private individual, and private individuals do not receive the tier of threat assessment that justifies state protection deployment. Harry's security situation was never primarily a financial negotiation. It was a classification negotiation, and on the day Charles dies, Harry loses the only person inside the institution who had both the motivation and the quiet authority to keep that negotiation from closing forever. Most people assume a royal title is permanent, something carved into stone the moment it's granted. In the British system, that assumption is dangerously incomplete. Harry's title, His Royal Highness Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, came not from sentiment, but from a specific legal instrument called letters patent. First issued in 1917 by King George V, it was designed to define precisely who inside the royal family could carry the style of prince or princess. That document has been rewritten twice since, in 2012 and again in 2021, specifically to address Harry's children Archie and Lilibet, whose path to royal titles had become politically uncomfortable for the palace. Each rewrite was made by a living sovereign. William holds those same powers from the first moment of his reign. Harry's HRH status currently exists in a gray zone, not fully active in the institutional sense, but not stripped either. It still opens certain doors in diplomatic settings, in legal contexts, in the quiet language of international protocol where titles function as currency. The question William faces almost immediately is which of three legal states Harry's title moves into: active, passive, or nominal. And William faces that question under pressure from courtiers from the press and from a public that has watched years of very public conflict. The deeper damage isn't even to Harry. It's to his children. Archie and Lilibet are now officially prince and princess. But the terms and conditions attached to those titles, their security entitlements, their ceremonial standing, their future institutional roles, exist at the sovereign's discretion. William's discretion. This is what Harry has never been able to say plainly in any interview, because saying it plainly would sound like an accusation. But the legal reality is simple. His children's royal identity is held, in part, in his brother's hands. If you want to understand every layer of what's legally at stake for this family, the titles, the finances, the sealed documents, this channel is building that full picture, piece by piece. If that depth matters to you, the subscribe button is right there. Harry and Meghan are not struggling. Their Netflix deal, reported at approximately $100 million, is real. Their income streams are genuine and substantial, but wealth and financial vulnerability are not opposites, and the threads about to snap are not the obvious ones. The Duchy of Cornwall, around 130,000 acres, generating tens of millions annually, exists to fund the heir to the throne. When Charles was Prince of Wales, it funded him. It transferred completely to William upon Charles's accession. During the difficult transitional years after 2020, Charles used personal resources drawn in part from accumulated duchy income to quietly cushion certain arrangements for Harry's household. Nothing dramatic, but real transitional support that helped navigate a period of enormous structural change. That cushion disappears the moment Charles does. Then there is Frogmore Cottage. Harry repaid the approximately £2.4 million spent on renovations from public funds, a fact that was widely reported. What wasn't widely reported was the administrative infrastructure that processed that repayment, managed the lease transfer, and handled the institutional paperwork. That infrastructure exists to serve the working monarchy. After Charles dies, Harry's quiet access to it ends completely. The sovereign grant funds Harry nothing directly, but the broader institutional apparatus it supports, communications offices, legal teams, logistical frameworks, has continued processing matters that touch on Harry's royal identity simply because those matters involve the institution itself. When William's palace operation takes over, there is every reason and no institutional barrier to simply stop. Most people don't realize how many invisible supports hold their life together until they're gone. Not all at once. Quietly. One thread at a time. Harry's situation is extreme. But that feeling of discovering how much you relied on something you never formally acknowledged, that's not a royal experience. That's a human one. There is a temptation to frame William as a villain in this story. Resist it. The most unsettling truth about what happens to Harry in William's first 24 hours is that William probably won't be thinking about Harry at all. Not out of cruelty, but because the weight landing on William's shoulders is so immediate and constitutionally demanding that everything else gets pushed to the periphery. And the peripheral is a dangerous place to be when a machine is reconfiguring itself. William is king the instant Charles dies. The accession council assembles. The Regency Act triggers a review of counselors of state, individuals legally authorized to perform certain royal functions. That list was already updated in 2022 after Harry and Andrew's effective removal made the existing configuration functionally inadequate. Harry is not on it. He will not be added. Simultaneously, a quiet review of royal warrants begins. Formal appointments that expire on the death of their grantor and require reapplication under the new sovereign. Harry's name appears in that audit. Not prominently, but it appears. And in each of these processes, his classification as a private individual becomes freshly, officially documented. Not because William signed an order targeting him, because the system requires clarity. And clarity, in Harry's case, consistently produces the same answer. He is outside the perimeter, and no one in the room where everything is being decided has the standing or the motivation to open the door. But there is one decision William cannot delegate, one that involves a document, and Harry has never seen it. In 2021, the Court of Appeal ruled that Prince Philip's will would remain sealed for 90 years. The judge described the privacy of royal wills as a matter of special and important public interest. If Philip's will warranted that protection, Charles's will, written during a period of acute family fracture, almost certainly carries the same shield. Harry cannot read it. The public cannot read it. But sealed does not mean unknown. Royal wills follow patterns drafted by senior legal counsel around precedents stretching back generations, written to address the specific vulnerabilities of the moment. Charles's moment included a son in California, a daughter-in-law who had publicly accused the institution of racism, 2 grandchildren with contested title status, and a family relationship both sides had described as broken. A will written against that backdrop does not ignore those realities. It addresses them precisely. Legal analysts point to several areas where Charles's will almost certainly contain specific language, financial provisions for Harry's household, arrangements regarding Archie and Lilibet's titles, and most significantly language around the dukedom itself. The Duke of Sussex title is a hereditary peerage granted in 2018 on the morning of Harry's wedding. Under normal circumstances, it passes to his son. But circumstances are not normal. And Charles's will may contain conditions around that dukedom that Harry has no mechanism to contest. Because Harry cannot challenge a sealed royal will the way a private citizen might challenge an ordinary estate document. He cannot walk into a probate court and demand transparency. He is subject to decisions made in a document he will never read, enforced by an institution he no longer serves, overseen by a brother whose relationship with him has become one of the most publicly documented fractures in modern royal history. The machine does not hate Harry. It simply does not require his input. Here is what survives. Harry is still a prince. Meghan is still a duchess. The Netflix deal is real. The memoir sold over 3 million copies in fewer than 3 months. By every external measure, this is not a story of ruin. And yet, everything they have built was constructed in the gravitational field of the British monarchy, not in service of it, in many ways in opposition to it. But opposition is still a relationship. It requires the other party to exist, to matter, to carry enough weight that pushing against it means something. When Charles dies, that relationship changes in a way no interview can address. Harry will no longer be the son who left. He will be the son whose father is gone, and the institution he left will belong completely and permanently to the brother he publicly described as trapped inside it. The brand Harry and Meghan have built is genuine in its reach and meaningful in its ambitions. But underneath its independent framing runs the unmistakable architecture of royal identity. The Sussex name, the HRH prefix, the gravitational pull of a story that began inside the most famous family on earth. What happens to that architecture when the king, who quietly held certain pieces of it in place, is no longer there? The answer is not collapse. It is drift, a slow, almost imperceptible movement away from the center of gravity that gave the story its weight. What Harry and Meghan keep is real. What they keep is theirs. But they will spend years navigating a question that Charles's death makes permanent. What does a royal identity mean when it is entirely untethered from the institution that created it? Some stories don't end. They just change shape. There is one more layer most people haven't considered. It doesn't belong to Harry. It doesn't belong to Meghan. It belongs to a boy named Archie, who is now a prince, who carries a title with real legal weight, and who will one day have to decide what to do with it. That story is coming next, and it may be the most consequential chapter of all.